Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we're going to theme parks to learn of some real horrors that happen within these usually fun places. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I'd like to preface this by saying that this event didn't happen to me, but to a friend of mine. So a few years ago now, my friend was going on holiday within the UK, and as part of his holiday, him and his family were going to one of the UK's biggest theme parks, called Alton Towers. I've been there before, and can testify that it is very fun indeed. However, something happened that day that changed his outlook on these parks for a long time. Like most people, he had been itching to try and get on as many rides as he could. Due to the size of this park and the waiting queues which incurred, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to be able to ride all the main rides in a single day. But he was determined. There was one ride in particular though, that he really wanted to go on, the Smiler. So after going on a few rides, he insists to his family that has to be the next ride they go on. But his sister is adamant that the queue is far too long and that they should leave it for a little while. Their arguing took a few minutes, but as they were arguing, more people came to the queue, and in frustration, the sister gave up, and on they went into the queue, and began the long wait before they would have their time on the ride. Now everything was going fine. They were just chit-chatting, playing games and waiting for their magical time on the ride. However, it wasn't until they were quite close to going on that something horrific happened. The next set of passengers boarded on the ride, and as the ride began going, there was a cart that was completely empty on the tracks. They weren't sure how this wasn't noticed, but honestly, people in the queue didn't really seem to pay any attention, and at the time, my friend says, neither did he. He wasn't sure if it would just keep moving during the course of the ride or whatever, but he gave it little to no thought. That is, of course, until the ride hit it head on. Everyone was in shock, and apparently blood was everywhere. To make matters worse, the initial impact knocked the carts back, and back again they went for another few smashes. The blood didn't stop, and everyone in the queue was horrified. There's no doubt in everyone's mind, no one wanted to go on that ride anymore. So of course, everyone had to leave, and paramedics were called, and the ride was shut down, much to my friend's dismay. But very understandable given what happened. There was an investigation, I believe, and I think they found that part of the machinery was faulty, hence why the cart was there, although I can't remember 100%. As my friend tells me, seeing the blood, but not being able to see the passengers, was terrifying. They were all very scared and grateful that they weren't a few places ahead in the queue, because who knows, that could very well have been one of them. During the course of the next few weeks, they learnt the fate of the people who were at the front of those carts who got smashed. 2 of the girls there apparently took the full brunt of the hit, along with 2 lads. However, the 2 lads seemed to be slightly better off than the girls, as the girls had to get their legs amputated, one their left and the other girl her right. It was extremely sad to see, and put my friend off theme parks for a long, long time. He and I haven't been back since, him from witnessing the event, and me from hearing about it, not to mention it was all over the news for weeks. Everyone felt extremely sorry for those girls. What should have been a fun day out resulted in absolutely horrific and life-changing injuries. This happened at a water park around 2003. I was swimming and annoying my friend at the time because he was a lifeguard there. I told him I would fake like I'm drowning just to be a dick. I was 13, mind you. I was swimming in the deep end of the pool, where above me was a jungle gym that you could swing across to the other side. This was over the deep end. All of a sudden, this kid of about 5 or 6 decides to try and do the jungle gym and get to the other side over the deep. He was wearing a life vest, mind you. I had a bad feeling that shit was about to go down. There was concrete on both sides, and there was a landing pad, but it was slippery. The kid slipped after trying to jump and grip one of the bars, and I heard a crack and a splash. My friend lost his shit and jumped into the pool to swim to the other side of the bars. The kid's body was limp, and I saw blood. I remember hearing that the kid was with a daycare, and all the teachers were screaming. At the time, cell phones weren't something that everyone had, and the ambulance came, and they strapped him onto a gurney and put him in there. I remember seeing the blood on the concrete, just red, and I didn't sleep that night. From what I was told, he was in a stable condition and had a concussion, but what happened to him isn't known until this day. Some people told me he was okay, some people told me that he died, and I can't go to water parks without thinking of that poor kid. I used to work as a lifeguard at a small water park. The park was so small that during the week, some of our only customers in the first half of the day were camps. About once a month, we would get a special needs camp. Why they thought it would be a good idea to take special needs kids to a water park is beyond me. Well, I'm at the top of our biggest slide, a platform that is about 40 to 60 feet tall with 2 slides, an open and completely enclosed slide. Anyway, we get this kid come up to us with one of the counselors. It's clear the kid can't really communicate. However, he appears to be scared of going down. Since the counselors are familiar with the park, they want him to go down the slide that's open to the elements, as it's much slower and less intense as the enclosed one. The kid is obviously reluctant to go down, so he steps out of line for a bit. Finally, he braves enough courage to go down. However, the first few feet down the slide, he gets stuck. He was kind of a bigger kid with a poor suit, and the slide hadn't been waxed in a while. Normally when this happens, people just push off the walls, and are good for the rest of the way down. Being special needs and all, his first instinct is to stand up. Here I am panicking, seeing a special needs kid standing 40 to 60 feet in the air on a slippery surface. Luckily, the counselor immediately reacted and went down slowly, grabbed the kid, and together they slid down to safety. However, the slide is poorly designed, to the point that I can't really see the people at the bottom. I'm trained to send people down when I see the person walking on the sidewalk. It's sort of complicated. Anyway, me in a stressed out state, I see the counselor walking around, so I assume it's safe to send the next rider down. However, the counselor never thought it necessary to turn around and grab the special needs kid from the bottom of the slide. Before I noticed this, it was too late. And to make matters worse, the person I sent down was a 300-pound semi-truck who was hauling down the slide. This semi-truck of a lady plows through the special need kids at the bottom. Luckily the kid was alright, but it was one of the worst days of the first year at the park. I used to work at a small water park, where there were some dry rides up the southern end. There was this 8-year-old kid just being a little shit, pushing in line, climbing up the side of the playground, knocking over kids' hats, that sort of bullshit. I warn him several times, then ask him to leave, but he doesn't. I go to ask my supervisor what to do, and he says to get the scissors, which means to cut the wristband, which means he can't go on any rides. I call him over, and he surprisingly complies, and before he can react, I grab his wrist and cut his wristband clean off. Naturally, he starts crying like a bitch. He runs off to get his mum, and she comes back around 15 minutes later and wants to talk to me about why I did that, and I explained the situation to her and how it's standard procedure. She nods and understands and knows that her son is a demon child. She leaves, but lo and behold, 10 minutes later, he comes. He tries to cut in line again, and I stop him and ask him to go back to his mum. His first reaction was to punch me in the balls. My supervisor sees and immediately calls security. Apparently his mum saw too, and she comes running. She doesn't say anything to her child, but goes and tells the supervisor to scare him. When security arrives 30 minutes later, they grab the kid, whirl him around and handcuff him. He's shitting himself at this point. They grab him and take him off in their golf cart. A few minutes later they return, as the kid has obviously been crying hard. He jumps out the cart and runs straight to his mum, who grabs him and walks out. People watching were stunned, but amazingly, and I shit you not, some applauded as they went off. That was the best day that I had ever worked at that place, but it was pretty horrible to be dealing with such a crappy little kid. When I was a lifeguard lead manager, this shit happened. It was mid-July and about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Not a cloud in the sky. It was hot for me wearing a set of khaki shorts and a thick polo shirt. I had the brake guard go on water runs as needed, and guards were permitted to rotate by the swimming pool. This was to keep them happy, and keep them from dropping like flies in the deathly summer heat. Naturally, the cycles of the day began like any other. We delegated starting spots, and determined the final rotation based on the number of guards who had shown up, which was all of them. For that, I felt lucky. We had lost 35 guards from the staffing pool as a result of laziness and the usual number of kids who had life events pop up. At our park, we had a slide that was about 60 feet high. This slide had 3 channeled slides that started off like a pipe and then became fluted. Half a pipe with no upper. One pipe, and the most popular, was the one slide that went down at an 80-degree angle. It was completely open. You sat down and you slid down the 60 feet within 2 seconds. Quite a thrill, really, if not a quick one. 2 guards manned the ride, one at the bottom, one at the top, to control the antics of the guests at all times. As midday comes around, I settle into the unusual rhythm, occasionally settling minor problems that our guests have. Bored, I begin watching the slides go down. 4 people come every 15 seconds like clockwork, as they should. The technique is flawless on the part of the guards, almost robotic at times. If I were to approach these guards, they would likely be lost in their own world of thought and repetition. At the top, I notice one of the guards turn around as a teenage male prepares to get on the slide. This is a problem. Teenage males are the trolls of the park. Their antics, a perpetual source of problems for all staff, from the lowliest trash kids to the upper echelons of management. Then, I see the kid take 2 steps backwards. I know what he's about to do, and he must be stopped. But, alas, what am I to do? I have no way to contact the lifeguard on top. There's no phone, no radio, and I blow my whistle twice. The guards nearby look at me, and the guard at the top turns around to find the source of my noise, to find me pointing to the kid. It's too late. The kid ran and jumped clean off the slide. Now, up to this point in my life, I had been afraid of things, getting in trouble at school, failing something miserably. They all made me a tad bit anxious. A lot of things had made me scared. A lot of things had made my stomach churn. But nothing, in all my life, had scared me this much until now. Seeing a young man fall to his impending doom and being powerless over it makes you feel terrible. Feeling by some extension of logic that you are indirectly responsible for this makes it even worse. Never in my life has my stomach and jaw dropped so fast. To his credit, he assumed the proper position of arms and legs being crossed, but now he was cleaning the air, flying like a lead brick. As he did so, his body turned ever so slightly. It was something he noticed, and fruitlessly tried to correct for it. Instead, he fell some distance before hitting inside the flume, and chaotically tumbling down the ride. I called the paramedics immediately, and we had to blackboard this kid out of the splashdown flume. The kid had messed his neck up pretty bad, and broke his fibula. He was carted off in an ambulance and put into a brace the moment we got him out. They said he was fine. He walked again, much to my surprise. Other than that, I heard nothing else from upper management. But I'm glad that the fall was okay. I am an ex-worker of Callaway Park. I worked there in the 2000s, and I have a horror story to share. It involved working on the ocean motion. You know, the swinging boat ride? Well, I was working it one day. And while working rides is probably the most tedious thing in existence, the ocean motion was always my favourite, because it had a shelter and a stool. So if it was ever raining, you'd stay dry and you could sit while the ride was going. Those cheap bastards did not have a seat at every ride, so your feet would be sore by the end of the day. Anyway, so the ocean motion is going, doing its thing, swinging back and forth. It's pretty full, and the line is pretty solid, when all of a sudden I hear a pop, and tons of this black inky fluid sprays right up through the centre of the ride, while the boats are in mid-swing. I hit the emergency stop, but the ride isn't stopping. Of course, when the boat is in its downswing, all that black fluid comes falling down on each ride passenger. At this point, I'm a teenager mashing the stop button. Emergency stop, anything. Why isn't it stopping? The boat is still swinging, when I notice that the wheel that's usually used for braking and slowing down the boat isn't raised at all, so of course it isn't going to stop. I immediately pieced together that it was likely hydraulic fluid that went up. A hose must have come off or cracked or something. So I grabbed the phone and called security. Usually when you call, you have to close the ride for a few minutes for any reason. Usually kids' sickness. They just log it and the day goes on as normal. So I call security and say, "Send everybody." And they're like, "What?" And I was like, "Mechanics, managers, maybe even paramedics. The ocean motion just spewed oil or something all over the passengers and won't stop. It literally won't stop." Of course, the ocean motion is the furthest end of the park, so even with people rushing, it takes them a few minutes to arrive. And you guys know how a pendulum works. Conservation of momentum and all of that. The ocean's motion was at peak swing and just keeps on swinging. By the time I hung up the phone, everyone in the line figured out what was going on and noped out of there. Here's where it gets really gross. Imagine you're a 12-year-old kid going on the ocean's motion for the first time, and due to some unexpected failure, you've got hydraulic fluid in your face, creating an awful stench. Not to mention it's at full swing for over 5 minutes. You want to get off, and you feel so sick, but you can't. So what happens? You involuntarily throw up. Of course, you're on the middle of the ocean's motion still, and it's in full swing, so the vomit goes everywhere, on pretty much everyone in front of you, on their heads, on their face, and it's gross. Now imagine you're in the exact same situation, and someone just vomited on your face. How could you hold it in at that point? More people started vomiting. This cascading chain of reaction caused about 5 more people to vomit on each other. The managers and mechanics and medics get there and they're all confused. At this point, there are very few options. No one wants to go under the boat and do repairs, because the thing is still swinging wildly. Plus, stopping the boat would be the primary concern. So they basically position people at each end of the ride, waiting for it to swing by. Then, when it was at the peak of the swing, try and grab it and put some friction on it before letting go, to steal a bit of momentum. It took a good 7 or 8 minutes to actually get the boat stopped and allow people off the ride. I know the managers tried everything. Full refund, offered literally anything in store, dry cleaning for all the clothes, and any number of things, but it didn't stop the lawsuits. and I believe there were some rather large court settlements. I worked there for the rest of the summer, but have never been a patron since. I was a kid, and I don't remember how old exactly I was. It's a bit hazy, and I almost drowned. I was enjoying a day out at a water park with my dad, and we wanted to try one of the slides. Now, here's how the slide was laid out. It had a slide, then a small pool, with ropes on the side, to help you move along if you were stuck. Then, another slide, another small pool, leading down to a final bigger pool. You rode down these 3 slides on a big inflatable donut. Now, there were a lot of people on the slide. You literally could barely see the water in the smaller pools because of how full of people it was. The woman letting people on did so without any pause whatsoever. It was really crowded. My dad decided I'd go alone on that slide, so here I was, alone on my big donut. The donut was just slightly bigger than I, and the woman let me go down the slide. When I arrived at the first small pool, there were so many people that I couldn't get out the way for the newer arrival. I was a kid, and the people arriving behind me weighed more than me. Someone's donut went underneath mine, and as they got pushed by the newer arrivals, my donut got pushed further and further up, and eventually it got overturned and I sank into the water. There were so many people in the pool, I couldn't surface. My head kept bumping donuts, and I didn't even know how to swim. I thought I wouldn't be able to get out, but I somehow managed to get to the edge, and my dad and the woman were there to pull me out of the water. Then we went on another ride together this time, and the attendee waited an appropriate amount of time before letting people on. I still have no idea how I managed to get to the edge. I was so confused by the turn of events, and I think it took me a couple of years before I realized that I could have very well died there. I was working at Kings Island on a ride called Diamondback. One day, the train came back, and this kid of about 12 years old was completely unconscious. He was slumped over in his seat, being held up by his mother. For those of you who don't know, the seats on Diamondback are lap bars, so this kid was literally folded in half, slumped over. Not to mention, this ride is as smooth as silk, so he didn't hit his head or anything. Anyway, we immediately called 911. Inside the park, any park telephone routes to the park's first aid station when you call 911. Meanwhile, we all do what we legally can as teens, as we weren't medically trained, which was offer a subpar first aid kit and water. I had to stand there completely helpless, watching his parents trying to wake him. They said he passed out whilst going up the first hill, and they had to hold him up in order for him not to flop through the entire ride. When the first aid cart got there, they lifted him up off the seat and into a stretcher and wheeled him off the ride, and he regained consciousness near the entrance to the ride. My area supervisor asked all of us if we were okay to keep working and if we needed to go home. I was terrified. I thought the kid was dead the moment I saw him slumped in his seat, and still etched in my mind. The memory isn't the worst part though. Standing there, legally unable to do anything even though I knew how, while the mother was crying and just trying to get a response, while the father tried to keep it together for the boy's sister, is the most haunting memory I have, and think I will have for a while. Back when I worked at a relatively large East Coast theme park, we had what many called the craziest shutdown anyone had seen or heard about. The ride I was working was a completely dark ride, a motion simulator that followed a track and had 3D projection screens. I was closing the control room that night, where we would dispatch ride vehicles and monitor ride cameras at the ride control screen. Over the headset, I heard that a drunk male couple were coming up the ride. Okay, fair enough. As they were getting on, they were acting slightly belligerent, so I was informed to watch them through the ride by the loader. In scene 1, they begin to make out. Fair enough, it happens all the time. I was narrating over the headset, since it was a slow night, and we were all shooting the shit. In scene 3, I see their hands moving due south, and the next thing I know, they're standing up in the RV. At this point, I depress the emergency stop, and all the ride working lights come up, with all the RVs stopping in place. Then I call the ride down, explaining the emergency stop is due to a drunk couple standing up. Here's where it gets interesting. They decided to slip their way out of the lap bars and begin climbing out of the RV. I get on the mic, telling them to please return to their sleighs. Little did I know, I selected the all call on the touchscreen for the ride mic, and the people down the ride entrance and passers-by were randomly hearing me yell, "Please return to your sleigh." I scan the monitor in an attempt to find them in the ride, and can't find them for the life of me. At this point, the entrance host calls controls to ask what the hell is going on. I explain and he bursts out laughing, and I hear my supervisor jingling keys as she's running up the exit platform, and she's laughing from the call over the radio about a drunk male couple standing up and climbing out. Once she arrives, we do a ride evac so we can reset from the E-stop and walk the track to find the culprits. After about 30 minutes, we can't find them and give up and start cycling the ride again before going back. We checked the control screens to see where they'd been, if there had been any ride doors open recently, and none had been since the morning, when maintenance was clearing the ride operation. At close, we had to fill out a witness statement for security, and we all had a good laugh. But next morning, maintenance tells us that they found 2 condom wrappers in scene 3, the scene that they escaped in. To this day, we have no idea where they ended up. I used to work at a theme park in the children's section. It was filled with moon bounce-like rides. I've seen my fair share of knocked out teeth and bloody noses, but the horror story is about neither of them. We were having a party at this moment. Now this part of the park can be rented out for children's birthday parties, which was indeed what was happening today. I had the pleasure of working with 3-year-old kids and younger, and the way it worked, we had to sit up on the edge of the slide and monitor how many kids went up and down, and make sure that they were not going down the slide incorrectly. Heads first, 2 at a time. One kid that couldn't be older than 3 decided that he wanted to go on the slide. At the time, he tried to go up, and there was already the maximum amount of people at the top of the slide. So, he was not allowed to go up. I had my leg up blocking the stairs so that he couldn't walk up. So he tried to crawl under it, and I moved my leg down to block him from going any further. "Don't touch him!" I didn't touch him. I didn't kick him. I simply moved my leg downwards. The kid's father was watching this happen and goes, "What the hell, man? Why did you just kick my son?" I looked at him shocked and told him that I did not kick his son. He said to me though, "Yes, you did. I saw you kick him square in the face. I'm telling a manager, this is bullshit." Then he threatened me. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said he would hurt me if I ever laid a hand on his son again. Remaining professional, I just said, "Okay, sir." And after saying this, he went on to tell every single person in the party that I had kicked his 3-year-old son in the face, which I did not do. By the end of the party, parents were heckling me and saying, "What are you doing here? You should work in a grocery store if you hate kids so much. Why are you gonna kick them?" I was pretty pissed off, but told my manager about it and we laughed it off. I'd been working there for 4 years at this point, so she knew I did nothing wrong. Not sure if the parent complained, but the dude was a psycho. Back in high school, I worked as a lifeguard for a small water park on the East Coast. The job sucked, the pay was horrible, and the management was a real bitch. So after the first month of working there, my motivation really plummeted. Well, in order to have insurance, the company that insured the water park hired individuals who would come to the pool as normal patrons, with hidden cameras, and pretend to drown in order to see how fast a competent one of the lifeguards would rescue them. Additionally, they had this life-size child mannequin that would sink to the bottom, and they would carefully put it in water to see if any of the lifeguards would spot them in time and rescue them. Now this thing looked just like a real kid, and was complete with swimming trunks and goggles, so underwater it was close to impossible to tell the real thing from the fake one. The first time the insurance company did this, the lifeguard on duty failed miserably to spot the dummy within time. So the whole park got audited, and everyone had to go through a retraining. But the company let us keep the child dummy for training and practice. Now for the good part. The park was still open to the public while we were going through our retraining, and everyone got to take turns carefully placing the dummy into the water, and testing on each other how fast they could find it. When it got to my turn for placing the dummy in the water, everyone had pretty much exhausted every way to put this thing in the pool. So I decided I would do something that no one else had done before. There was a water slide that pretty much went around the park, and I came up with the idea that I would throw it halfway down and it would slide over the side and land in the lazy river while nobody watches. Sounded like a great idea. Well, about halfway down, I grabbed this thing and throw it off the side, and completely miss where it was supposed to land. Instead of the pool, it goes head first onto the pavement right in front of all the chairs and families. People were screaming. Kids were crying. Lifeguards were freaking out, and everyone thought they had just seen a kid fall about 40 feet onto concrete and have his face completely smashed in. After numerous complaints and threats of lawsuits caused by the emotional trauma the guests had endured, I was fired that afternoon. The dummy itself was too damaged to be used anymore. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I'd like to give a huge thank you to everyone who voted on today's topic. It was incredibly close with a glitch in the Matrix, so I think I'll definitely be producing that video relatively soon. And who knows, maybe even some Let's Not Meet or concert stories around the corner as well. And there'll be plenty of paranormal to come, for those of you who requested it also. If you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment. It goes a long way and really helps out the channel, and I appreciate it tremendously. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell icon to be notified every time I upload. If there's a story that you would like me to read on Mortis Media, all that you need to do is send it to my email or post it to my Reddit. Either's fine, but make sure you include plenty of punctuation, paragraphing and description, as these three things are key to maximize the chances of your story being read. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.